Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Dan Clark. New York has a new SUNY chancellor, and it's a familiar face. You might remember John King from 10 years ago when he was New York's education commissioner. He left to work in the Obama administration and even spent a year as the U.S. Secretary of Education. But now he's back to lead the State University of New York, one of the largest public university systems in the country. And he says his experience, including his own time in public grade school, will drive how he does the job.
I know firsthand from my own life and my career as an educator, the transformative power of education. As SUNY Chancellor, I will strive every day to ensure that we deliver together on that promise for every SUNY student.
Let's get into that and more with Keisha Kluge from Bloomberg Government. Keisha, thank you as always.
Thanks for having me.
So you covered John King. You were not at Bloomberg at the time, but you were covering education. And what I remember about John King, the bullet points that I'd like to, refresh, he was in charge of the rollout of Common Core. And I think that that was like the big headline of his tenure there for a lot of people around the state, whose parents were kind of upset that their kids had started in the old math and then had gone to the new math and all of that good stuff. How do you think he was perceived?
Yeah, I think he kind of jumped into a very tumultuous time in New York State education. I was actually covering at the local level for the Observer Dispatch. So I was on the ground with some of the first testing opt-out movements. I think the biggest issue for parents was that these new learning standards were put in place in September. I mean, I heard stories of teachers like printing out the textbooks so they could teach them the next day. Yeah. So it was very rushed, which I don't think anyone can contest. That was a pretty rushed rollout, but it was to get those federal race to the top dollars. In order to ensure those dollars, we had to put this learning standards in place. And then the issue came when there was testing on that curriculum in April, and parents were, nervous that the kids were that the teachers were teaching to the test and that the kids were having these learning standards put in place too soon and being, graded on it. And then the other issue is at the same time, the teacher evaluations were tied to the testing.
Right.
And so that was the big thing, is that, teachers are trying to teach this new curriculum, and then it also reflects how they're going to get paid, how they're going to keep their jobs. So it was a very difficult time. I remember John King going to different public hearings across the state. He came to the Utica area, and it was not a nice scene to be at. I mean, there were people just screaming. It's their children,
Right.
So it gets very heated, and they're screaming at him. And he, I think to his testament is that he is remained very calm and just calmly was like, ask me your questions. I'll try to answer what I can. And we're really just trying to listen and take that and put it into place. So his tenure was very interesting. It kind of continued to rise. The opt-out movements were, I forget what the numbers were, but very high in the state, the highest in the nation, especially on Long Island. And then he kind of had exited in the middle of this.
So you've covered SUNY chancellors too. It's an interesting transition from state ed commissioner to U.S. Secretary of Education to something that I left out a few minutes ago, is that he also ran for governor of Maryland recently, and now he's come back to New York to be the SUNY chancellor. Just briefly, is there anything that we know about him that might inform what kind of chancellor he might be, or just looking at SUNY chancellors in general?
I think that he is a very big picture guy. So I think he'll come into the state university system and take kind of an overall view of it. He does have that K-12 connection, which I think one of the prior chancellors, Nancy Zimpher, had really stressed was, we're not just taking the kids from K-12 and it ends, and then from college and it ends. You want it to be this pipeline all the way through to the job that they eventually get with their degree. So I think that he could bring a very interesting outlook on this position. But we'll have to see. He's inheriting just a host of issues. We've had a lot of turnover in the SUNY chancellor. We've had 2, 3 in the last few years here, coming after Nancy Zimpher, who was there for a very long time. And so he's inheriting that. There's a lot of money issues because of historic underfunding of the SUNY schools at the same time, and kind of intertwined with the fact that they're losing enrollment, which many schools are. It's not to SUNY's, detriment or fault. It's the fact that there's just fewer kids in the state. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting. He's taking on a big task here, and we'll see if he's up for the challenge.
Another big headline from the week that is kind of a weird, it's complicated because there's a lot of dates involved, but I will give our audience the long and short of it. The AG's chief of staff, we found out, I believe it was last weekend, we found out that he resigned in late November after being accused of sexual harassment by a person who had worked at the office, wasn't working at the office at the time of the alleged incident. Ibrahim Khan is his name. He resigned in late November, effective at the end of the year. And then we also know that he was accused of being involved in a situation with a woman in 2014 as well at the city level. He was cleared of wrongdoing there. A lot of people are calling attention to this because of the kind of, maybe I'll call it ironic dynamic of her doing the major investigation into Governor Cuomo, which led to his resignation, very public investigation. And then her chief of staff is accused, and they do an investigation for about 2 months, but it's private. And she made a point of saying this week that that was the distinction, is that this was a private investigation with an employee and has been handled, excuse me, whereas the governor was the governor of New York. We have about a minute left. What was your take on the situation?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that people are bringing up is that it was known about before the election, and it wasn't released before then, or there was no notification of it. And I think there's also some question of where the funding came from for this investigation, because it should have gone through the state comptroller's office. And one of the last articles I at least read on it had said, we didn't see anything about a contract. So it almost has it seems like it was trying to be under wraps, which, like you said, is a very interesting comparison to how Cuomo's investigation was handled. So I don't know. We'll have to see what shakes out with it. Speaker Hasty said there won't be an investigation of Tish James. So I don't know.
Right, and Democrats are rallying around her. So honestly, my gut says that it's probably not going to go anywhere, but maybe something to keep an eye on in the new year. Keisha Kluge from Bloomberg, excuse me. Keisha Kluge from Bloomberg Government, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.